this is Jenny from Just Being Me, and you're listening to the Learning to Love Yourself podcast, the show that inspires you to put yourself first.
Learning to love yourself on the path to happiness. Learning to love yourself on the path to happiness.
Welcome back to the podcast, and this week we're chatting with the very lovely Shona Hirosn. Now, I found Shona on LinkedIn when I very first started going on LinkedIn. Well, not very first, because I joined LinkedIn and then decided I was going to take it serious because I quite like being there. And Shona was one of the first people that I connected on with there because her way of looking at life just made me go, yeah, because I'm all about the mental health. I'm all about the looking after yourself mentally and being who you are and giving yourself time to be. And Shona is very much, she poked me in a way that I needed to be poked about my physical health, but also the effect that had on my mental health and how I could just be because I'm physically doing something. So I needed to get Shona on here and share that with all of you. So welcome, Shona. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
Oh, you're welcome, Jenny. Thank you for that lovely introduction. That was, I still kind of blush when I hear stuff like that, because I think, you know what, even if I just inspire one person and help to change them, then I've done my job. That's good enough for me.
So, Shona, I mean, on this, we do inspirational stories because people have had a journey. But actually, this is going to be a little bit different, isn't it? We will do a little bit of your story, but also about what you do and how that intermingles with what I do. So you had a massive moment in your life, didn't you, that changed how your life was? You completely changed your life from before and after, didn't you? Do you want to share a little bit about that for me?
Yeah. I'll keep it as brief as I can. So I call it now my former life. I was a lawyer for 20 years, and you know, it's easy to blame the culture of where I worked that pushed me to kind of that burnout, which I had. But it was only when I had a very, very serious accident, and I'll mention that in a couple of minutes. I realized that actually it was my values as well, the values I'd been brought up with, my perfectionist mindset. You know, always, my mum always taught me to you know, that it was the woman's job to do all the housework, the cleaning, the cooking. And, you know, maybe it was that mindset back in sort of the 60s, 70s, even 80s into the 90s. Now it's more of an equal role. But I kind of...
So looking at that mindset was at that point in time when women weren't working.
Yeah.
Part-time jobs to fit around the children, or, you know, it's a completely different way of life now. When you're both working full-time, the house then should become both people's responsibilities. But it's interesting after you said your values, because when I have my burnout, what I look at now is I recognize that I have no boundaries. No boundaries.
Boundaries is a big one, massive. You know, I've always been a bit of a people pleaser. I like to say yes to everything. But I realized I wasn't really being very kind to myself then. And the minute something would go wrong, that would backfire on me. And I think because of that perfectionist mindset that I had, I was really hard on myself. So I was probably my biggest critic, and I couldn't let it go. I just could not let that go. And that held me back. That made me procrastinate. You name it, I had it.
And I can so associate with that because, you know, certain areas of my life, I needed to be perfect. So I couldn't write notes and cross things out. I couldn't even use Tipex to get rid of it. The notes had to be perfect when I wrote them, and they had to be perfect. So you'd start the page again, copy out what you've got. If I went wrong, now it doesn't make any difference to me. They're notes, I can read them back and I can work out what I need to know from them. It doesn't matter if it's been crossed out. Sometimes it's quite interesting to look at what I crossed out. What did I think I meant there? You know, it's changing that mindset, isn't it? It's working on that mindset.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You were struggling with being a lawyer before the big moment then?
Yeah, I think if I go back to sort of 2010, 2011, and my daughter was sort of 3 at the time, and I wanted to be that mum who was at the school gates at least once a week to pick her up. And I was the only female in the team where I worked, and I made a request for flexible working, and it was accepted. But my manager, his his values are very different to mine. He said, well, look, you need to make a choice between being a mum or having a career. And I thought myself quite senior at that point as well. So I had quite a lot of responsibility. I had a management role. And I, bearing in mind this was the 2010s as well, I thought, wow, is that how workplaces still are? But that's just, I was kind of used to it, and I did thrive on a bit of stress. But it's when that stress starts to interfere with your daily life. So I tried it. I started doing the school drop off. So I would, on a Wednesday, I would do compressed hours. I would do 10 till 2 on a Wednesday, because I had almost an hour to get into the office and back. And this was way before anyone did any homeworking. But I still had the same targets as the full-timers. And it got to a point that on a Thursday, I was coming in, in order to keep up with my KPIs, which was such an important factor for this organization, I had to keep on taking on new work and do training, and we weren't allowed to ever check any emails out of work either. And I would come in on a Thursday morning to probably 100 plus emails, which all needed actioning. The case management system they had was terrible and sometimes would crash for a day or two. So that would put you back. And I would literally come into the office for about 5:30, 6 on a Thursday morning. And I wasn't leaving till about 11 o'clock at night. Same again on a Friday. And then I was going in on Saturdays. And it very quickly got to that point where I went from being the bubbly one in the office, always coming in, morning, to not speaking, exhausted. I could sit at my desk and read the same line 50 times and not be able to tell you what it said. I never even realized that just coming away from my desk for a few minutes and just, going out and getting some fresh air or doing a stretch could make any difference. But equally, nobody ever pointed out the obvious behavior changes in me, which were massive. And I became disassociated with myself. It also then affected my home life, because hardly had any relationship with my husband, hardly any relationship with my daughter. And then I stopped also going out with friends. So whereas maybe once a month I'd meet up with the girls and we'd go out for a girly night out on a Saturday, the idea of getting dressed up and being sociable was I just couldn't even think about that. And I'm the sort of person who doesn't normally leave the house without my mascara. And, after a while, they stop asking. So I lost a lot of friends as well that way. And it got to a point in sort of mid 2013 where I felt so unwell. I mean, you mentioned about the physical impact of burnout. My first physical experience of it was then, and I didn't know what it was. So I would get this burning feeling in my feet as if they were in a bunch of stinging nettles.
Wow.
And my hands, I would literally lose the feeling in my hands. They'd start off where the tips of my fingers would just start going numb and they'd claw in on me. And then I wouldn't be able to do anything. Sometimes it was just for a few minutes. And on one occasion, it was a couple of days. Now you imagine not having any feeling in your hands, but it was awful. I had to
as well.
my husband would come with me to the bathroom. It was, and there was one time I cut my hand quite badly and I couldn't feel a thing, which was scary. And then in May 2013, I collapsed and I was blue lighted to hospital. And they weren't sure if I'd had a heart attack or a stroke. It was, I didn't even admit this for a long time because I was so ashamed, but I even lost control of my bowels. And that is, it's just your whole pride, everything goes out the window with that. You feel disgusting. Anyway, I had 5 hours of tests in the hospital. I had everything from CT scans, my blood gases, bloods, something called nerve conduction test, which was like a form of torture. Great for getting the truth out of someone though. And then at the end of the 5 hours, the doctor came out and he said, "Oh, Mrs. Hirosn, we've got good news. Your test results are normal and there's nothing wrong with you." And as much as I didn't want to be unwell, that didn't feel like good news because I knew my body.
You need to know, don't you? You know your body and you need to know what the answer is. Why do I feel like this?
I know, but there was no follow-up. It was just like, right, we can go now. And I remember coming home and it taking every ounce of energy for me just to walk up the stairs and get into bed. And I stayed there for 3 weeks. And that wasn't like me. I was always a really fit and active person before that. And then I felt under pressure to go back to work because they were like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. So I did. I went back after about 3.5 weeks, and I was actually able to do a secondment on another team for a bit, which helped. It definitely helped a little bit, but I knew that was only temporary. And the idea of going back to my main role was just like, so overwhelming. And then I started making mistakes at work, and I won't go into a massive detail about them. I mean, they were simple admin things really, but on one of them, they made a scapegoat out of me, and they suspended me on full pay while an investigation took place. And that was when I had my first panic attack. And I honestly thought I was dying. I had no idea what was happening to me. And it was like an out of body experience. The best way I can explain it was when you're in a swimming pool and you're under the water and you can hear muffled voices above you. It was like that. And it was really difficult to explain, but it was so frightening as well. And I didn't talk about it. I just felt like an idiot. And then at the end of 2013, I just felt so low in myself, both physically and mentally. And I felt like I was losing everything. And I walked out of that job that I'd once loved, and I'd been there for 14 years. It was just before Christmas. I had no other job to go to. And remember thinking, oh my goodness, I've got probably enough money to last me till the end of January. And then I need a job. And I started applying for jobs as a cleaner, working in a supermarket, stacking shelves. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but to go from the position I was in to thinking that's all I was good enough for. And then, of course, I was getting rejected from those jobs. So that made me feel even worse. But yeah, I mean, I'll stop there because then it can, goes into more. But that was kind of my first experience of physical burnout.
So, but you've obviously got yourself around to a place of actually, was it actually that sort of the physical work that you're now teaching everybody else to do? Was it that brought you back round to being the Shona that we all know, love, and love?
Partly, I would say half, yeah. So when I sort of in the weeks following that episode and me walking out, I started getting back into the gym. I'd always been, physically fit anyway. I mean, in my teens, I swam for my country, and I'd always been, it was kind of bred into me to go to the gym and stuff and walk. But I'd stopped doing it. The most exercise I was getting when I was working up until the end of 2013 was walking up the 4 flights of steps to my desk where I'd sit then all day and not move. So I started getting back into the gym, started noticing how that made a difference to how I felt, both mentally and physically. And a lot of those kind of tingling feelings in my feet and my hands started to go away. I felt more in control, although I realized I still needed a job. And there was a guy in the gym who I knew quite well. And he said, look, I'm opening up my own spin studio and fitness center. He said, I'd love you to come and be an instructor. But I wasn't qualified at the time. And I was also nearly 40. And I thought, who wants someone in their 40s being, their fitness instructor?
What a story you're telling yourself. Who wants somebody in their 40s? Of course.
I mean, I'm 10 years on again from there and I'm still teaching. So, it says a lot. But I thought, well, okay, it gave me something to focus on. He funded me to go through it all anyway, because he wanted me to work with him. And over the next couple of months, I remember the first session I did, it was a spin class, and there were like 20 bikes out, me at the front of the studio on a platform with a microphone pack on and having to teach this class. And at first I thought, oh my goodness, there's no way I can do this, But when I started and I saw everyone enjoying it, coming up to me going, oh, your music was brilliant. And then I started to really find my confidence again. And that was what started to get me back. And then the fitness side became part of me again, because I realized how it made me feel. And then what I hadn't realized at that point is I still hadn't worked on my boundaries, and I hadn't even thought about that. So I got headhunted for a job back in law. And this was a couple of years later. So I kind of did an admin-y kind of role for a couple of years, but I went from being burnt out to bored out, if that's any such words, because I needed a bit of a challenge. And this kind of job opportunity came at a right time. And I was completely honest with them at the interview about what had happened in the previous role, because I thought I've got nothing to lose. And I asked for flexible
And
work.
also nothing to hide.
No, I thought it was, if they wanted me that much, then I could be honest with them as well. And I was. I didn't, name shame people or anything. I accepted that a lot of it was down to me and learning stuff about myself, which I had learned a lot about. And I was still able to teach my classes around this job, but also be able to drop Martha off and my daughter off at school and, pick her up. So that was a good balance. And within the first 3 months of being there, we were invited to this award ceremony in Hertfordshire, and where our head office was. And I won Employee of the Quarter award. So on one side of it, it made me think, yes, okay, I'm worthy. I am a good lawyer. I am good at my job. But it was the message behind it, where we'd been working on some big projects, and I did have to give up a couple of my evenings and my weekends. And they kind of made it that badge of honor that, we will always reward people who give up their social time and their weekends to work harder. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, that's actually not the message I want to give out. And then it got to a point where I was asked to be involved, because I was very heavily involved in my previous role with holiday and travel litigation. And I loved it. I found it really, really interesting. And there's not that many people in the UK who specialise in that. And I'd been asked to get involved with a new white paper to amend the package travel regulations, which had been around since the 90s. And now, that was when people were still booking holidays on teletext and brochures. And now it's moved on more to the online market. And to have that opportunity was just incredible. So I was working in London 2 or 3 days a week, working on this white paper, which was great fun, but also, very, very demanding as well. And then I was back in the Bristol office for the next 2.5 days. And we were taking on a big recruitment drive at the time. And I was asked to be involved in the talent acquisition for that, go to recruitment fairs, do the interviewing. And then we worked in an open plan office. And then I was also asked to be the main trainer on certain areas. And we'd all have a dedicated hour a day where you have to do a lot of written work, and you needed that focus time. But I always keep having people coming up to me and tapping me on the shoulder going, oh, can I just bend your ear on this? And of course I'd be like, yeah, sure. But even a question.
Yeah, the lack of boundaries. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The lack of boundaries.
And then that was then putting my own work behind, and then I was rushing mine. And my manager had an issue with that, because she said, well, look, when we had our one-to-ones each month, she'd look at written work, look at some of your calls, and she'd say, you've repeated the same line twice there. And I'm like, I didn't want to be defensive and go, oh, well, that's because so-and-so tapped me on the shoulder and I had to answer. But what I should have done was say, I'm not available during this time. However, book a slot or come and see me during this time. And I never did. And
the trouble is, when you do that and you say yes to people, even though actually you need this time for you, what's happening is you're saying to those people, and you can come and do that again and again.
Yeah,
because
it becomes expected.
Yeah, because you haven't put that boundary in place. So when you put the boundary in place that says, actually, I'm in my work hour, I'm in my written hour, or whatever you called it, don't interrupt me. People know, oh God, that's Shona's hour and we can't go that time. We need to go afterwards. It makes such a difference. But it doesn't mean that people walk away. It just means that people understand what your needs are as well as theirs.
Yeah. But I also, on top of that, I still hadn't learned things at home. My husband, bless him, was always saying, look, I'll cook dinner tonight, or I'll sort Martha out, with a pat lunch before school. And I'd be like, no, it's fine. I'll do it. I've got it covered. And I wouldn't let go. And after I'd only been in the job about 9-10 months. And in order to keep my fitness levels up as well, I would cycle to work in the morning, because we had showers in the office. And it was my way as well of decompressing, and just starting my day off, my kind of commute thing. And one cold February morning, I was cycling into work, rushing as always, early start. And the next thing I knew was 2 weeks later, I was being awoken from a coma, which I'd been induced into. And I hadn't even realized what I'd done. I mean, the funny thing with that was I had pain in my fingers on my right hand, but I couldn't feel any other pain. And yet the consultant came and told me that I'd had a major accident. I'd broken all the bones around my orbital area around my eye socket. I completely smashed my cheekbone to pieces. I fractured my jaw, and I had a fracture at the base of my skull. But apparently I hadn't broken my fingers. And I'm like, really? They really hurt. But anyway, and then
coming from somebody that's had a car crash and had a broken part of a bone in her neck, I know the biggest pain was my thumb.
Yeah.
There'd been no damage to my thumb, but it was just going, oh, come on,
isn't it?
my thumb around. Please don't touch my thumb.
I know.
It's a strange thing how the body works, isn't it?
It is. And I remember being given a mirror to have a look at my face because I wanted to. And I was just like, oh my goodness, that doesn't look like me. I literally had a hole above my eyebrow here. And they said, look, you're going to have major facial reconstructive surgery. We need to rebuild your face on the left side. And I didn't really, do you know what? I just took it in. I remember my husband being told that, and he was sick. He had to go out the room and be sick. Whereas I was just like, just do whatever you need to. And anyway,
I mean, looking at you now, you would never know.
Well, I'm 93, you see, really. You know what? It's you've got to laugh if you get. People say to me, like, when I talk about my accident, and I get a lot of sighs around the room, and like, oh my goodness, and especially when I describe how they have to do the surgery and stuff, and I've got pictures as well showing me in bed with I look like Mr. Bump with a big tube sticking out my head and bandages. But it actually turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me, because during that long recovery, it made me, for the first time, I think, in my life, slow down. Yeah. And it made me think to myself, gosh, if this really was my last day on earth, would I be happy with what I've achieved? And my answer was absolutely not. And this is why I say that was my past life, because I now had a chance to, accept falling down is an accident, staying down is a choice. And, as much as I didn't want, the surgery and the pain I went through after that was horrendous. And I couldn't even eat solid food for 4 months. I had to learn how to walk again. I had to learn how to drive again because I couldn't drive for 18 months. I had surgery for another 18 months after because I'd partially lost the sight in my left eye, lost my hearing in my left ear. And thankfully, I'm okay now. What it has left me with, and I've only recently found this out, is I now get very, very serious sinus infections. And I've got to have a little bit more work done. And I only found that out last week. So, but you know what?
In the grand scheme of things, to have some serious sinus problems in comparison to your life, the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And it's also, when you were saying about, laughing about it, is the fact that actually, because what you've done is you've gone through a very traumatic situation and you've learned some lessons from it, you've taken from it and you've disassociated from it. So the emotions is not keeping you in victim mode all the time because of a victim of an accident. Poor me, I feel this. You're not in that mode anymore. You're in the mode of going, do you know what? It did me a favor. Actually, look at all the lessons I've learned from that. Yeah. And now I want to build and create my life like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was such a victim before that. I was always like, I was always the pity party of myself. I was always like, oh, poor me. Why do bad things happen? And I think when you keep believing that and telling yourself that, that kind of talk, it happens. And something just switched to me. Something made me a far more resilient person, someone who was going to, fight. Maybe that's my stubbornness as well. So it's helped in some ways. But, I was able to let go of that perfectionist mindset. And some people say, well, did you get therapy? Did you have help? No, I actually didn't. I mean, I did. I think one of the most impactful conversations I had once, and I knew I needed help, and I was at my lowest point, and it wasn't long after I'd had my accident, and I felt useless again. You know, I felt just as I was picking my life back up. Now I was like, I wasn't able to spend again much time with my daughter, who was now at the time she was 8, because I was not able to do a lot. And my husband actually left me for someone else right in the middle of me, you know, recovering. And we are still together. I took him back, which some people might find difficult to understand. And that's a completely another story. But, you know, we've now moved on. This is 8 years ago. But at my lowest point, I thought my daughter's better off without me. Nobody else needs me. My husband doesn't want me. And I was at the point of thinking, well, I don't even know if I've got a career in law anymore. What else can I do? I had no idea what else I could do. I could be a personal trainer, but then I wasn't even able to go for a walk, so couldn't do that. So I just thought, wow. And I got to a point where I went to the end of the road where I live, and we've got a little beach. And in the middle of May, I sat on the beach and the tide came in and washed pretty much right over me. And I didn't feel anything. And somehow the Coast Guard were called and they came and rescued me. And that was, you know, sometimes you've got to get to that lowest point. You know, I'm not proud of it, but the next day, my daughter came downstairs and she knew there was something not right. And bearing in mind, she was 8. It was the words she said to me. She said, "Mummy, you can have all my money." And I remember there was £1.22 in a little money box. And she said, "I'd rather have my mummy than have no money." And I was just like, and that was my wake-up call to get some help. So I rang my local Mind charity and spoke to this amazing lady. No idea what her name was. I wish I had, because she probably saved my life. Her and Martha actually did. And she just told me I needed to work on my boundaries and go on a journey of self-discovery and learn to say no. And that's when that started to change. I realized that, you know, I needed to learn how to say yes to no. And that wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't a rude thing.
And it's also about when you say no to somebody else, you're saying yes to yourself.
Yeah.
And there you have the two things, because, you know, when you're in the stage that you've been in, I've been in, you don't want to say no to somebody else, and you don't want to say yes to yourself, because, you know, saying yes to yourself, that you can rest, that you can take time for yourself, feels like you're not good enough, doesn't it? When you're in that place, you need to be going all the time, because if you stop, then you're weak, you've failed. And that's not the truth, because we're human beings, not human doings.
Yeah. And failure now to me is success in disguise. I think I feel sorry for someone actually if they haven't failed.
But how do you learn your lessons if you don't fail?
Exactly. And, you know, I think the big thing for me as well, when I look back, was, you know, I didn't go when I first started feeling the physical symptoms of burnout. I didn't go to the gym then, because I was always like, well, I just don't have time, or I'm too tired. And I'd always be full of excuses. But that was when I started to realize that, and this was like, especially during my recovery as well, after my accident, again, I wanted to get back into the gym as soon as I could. I couldn't do it. But what I found was really helpful, because I'm not the sort of person that can just sit around, right? Even when I've got tubes sticking out my head and stuff, I'm like, no, I need to do something. And that was when I came up with this concept of movement snacks, and realized that even just 1 minute of moving, it doesn't matter how, you know, if you've got an injury or anything like that, it doesn't matter, because there's always something you can do. And I was totally inspired 18 months after my accident when, with 2 weeks notice, and my husband was, he's ex-forces, and he got invited by Team True Spirit, which were part of the Invictus team, to come and do a half Ironman event. And I said, I want to do it. And he went, how on earth are you going to do it? It was 2 weeks, it's 2 weeks away. He said, it's a 1.2 2 mile swim. Well, I knew I could swim because I used to swim for whales, but not in a blinking, massive lake, right? And it was like freezing cold. And then it was a half marathon followed by, and then, then the bike, which was 56 miles, and then a half marathon. And I'm like,
well, not far at all then, Shona.
I've ridden a bike, ridden bikes to work every day, and I guess I can run. But putting them back to back after each other. But what really inspired me was the night before we sat with the Team True Spirit guys, spent the night with them. And these guys had limbs blown off, when they were fighting, brain injuries, you name it. But nothing stopped them from finishing those events. It didn't matter if it took them 8 hours or 2 days. They would get over there, and they had specialist recumbent bikes to get them, moving. And I mean, some of them were being literally carried over the finish line, crawling over it. And then I just thought, wow, if they can do it, I can do it. And I did. And I did my first half Ironman event 18 months after.
That's amazing, Shona.
I can't say I enjoyed it. I mean, my hands on the bike, because the big thing for me was to get back on a bike after having such a serious accident. And my hands looked like I'd been on a white knuckle, right? But I still did it.
You used all of the physical attributes to build your mental health back up, because your mental health, we can often sit in life just doing what we do without realizing how much we're destroying our mental health, how it's causing suffering with our mental health. Because throughout a lot of your story there were so many moments where I could sit here and go, yeah, well, that was your body giving you a nudge. You need to stop. You need to give yourself a chance to be able to sort out what's going on in your head. You need to rest. You need to give yourself time doing something else. There are so many moments, aren't there, when you look back, because having suffered burnout myself and having walked away from my career, that there are all these moments. And I when I first left my career, I blamed it on so many different things. But what I realized now is I did not know my values. I didn't recognize my boundaries. I put no boundaries in place. I didn't know who I was. I'd lost who I was because I'd just become the person everybody else went to.
Yeah.
And there are all the messages there, but the body will keep going until it makes you stop.
Yeah.
And
you know what? I totally believe that. And I think it, those physical symptoms can show up in so many different ways as well.
Headaches,
and I think
a biggie for a lot of people. Headaches will come up. I have got
massive. That's just one of them. I did my own podcast series a few years ago, and I actually interviewed people who experience physical symptoms of burnout, because a lot of people talk about the mental side of it, the exhaustion, the irritability, the depression. Nobody really was talking about the physical symptoms. And I never really got to the bottom of what was going on with my hands and my feet. But once I started to change my lifestyle, they all went. And I mean, I was even diagnosed back in about 2014 with fibromyalgia, because they kind of ruled everything else out. And I was deemed to be in a wheelchair by the time I was 50. And I'm 50 now, and I'm still doing box jumps and burpees,
But the way that the brain works is because, when I had my accident, I was pregnant with my first child, who's now 34. So when I had my accident, what they said to me is, we'll get you back to a certain place, but, you're going to really struggle as you get older. So when you start hitting your 50s and onwards, you're really going to feel a lot of pain. And my brain was going, when I turn 50, oh God, I'm going to start feeling pain now. And that's because the brain is the place that actually sends out the signals to do pain.
Yeah.
And it started sending out signals. And it's because my brain had been programmed from my early 20s. Remember, in your 50s, you're going to start feeling pain. Remember, when you turn 50, you can start feeling pain. Your back's going to hurt. Your knees are going to hurt. Your hips are going to hurt. There are physical things in my body that do still cause problems, but they are actual bone things that are happening. So, but the pain side, the brain side, was the fact that I just absolutely persuaded myself to believe what the doctor had said, that when I turn 50, I'm going to be in a lot of pain. You take the choice. You take your choices in your life. And I talk to a lot of people who will say to me, I can't leave my job. Well, why can't you leave your job? Yeah, you can't just walk out, but you can make the plan to leave your job. You don't have to stay there. If you're unhappy in your job, don't stay there. Go find a job you're happy in.
The one thing I would say, though, as well on that, and I see this a lot, people leave bad bosses, not bad jobs. However, I don't 100% agree with that statement, because I've worked with a few people now who have come to me with burnout, and they've blamed their workplace. And okay, yeah, in some cases it is down to having a bad boss. I'm not saying that's not the case, but if you're not dealing with the cause of the problem, and you're saying, oh, you're blaming it on somebody else, it's the workplace, blah blah blah, you're going to still carry those problems into your next role.
Next
And I mean,
job.
I worked with one lady a few years ago, and she still comes to me now for an accountability session once a month. And she was exactly like that. She'd left one job because she was burnt out, gone into another job, same role, but her mindset straight away was, well, it's just going to be exactly the same, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
because she'd taken that with her and not dealt with front eating. And also not identified what her role was in that original job. Because, I could have walked away from my career saying, yeah, it was their fault. And I could give you a whole list of reasons as to why. But the reality was, I didn't put my boundaries in place.
yeah.
I didn't say no. I didn't put my family first. I didn't look at the values. Because, as I said to you briefly before we got on this call, within 2 months, they'd replaced me.
Mm.
Where I can't be replaced is as mum, as wife, as sister, as, all of those places I cannot. That's my unique role. I can't be replaced from that. Everywhere else, I can be. And that's the place where you need to focus into. And since, I don't know about for you, Shona, but since making that decision to change the way that my mind works and the way that I think and what I feel, I don't feel the same need to go out and do the high adrenaline things of partying all weekend. And, I don't need to spend lots of money on different things. What I need to know is be present with my family. I do need, and also be present with myself, which takes me to what happened to me this morning. So this morning, because Shona, look, see, right next to me,
You've got them.
going to create snackable cards. And for me, a few of you might know, but I had breast cancer at the beginning of 2024. Just trying to work which year we're in at the moment. And I knew I needed to get my exercise up because of the fact that I needed to be repairing, and also the tablets that I'm now on takes away from my muscles and those sorts of things. So I needed to do some more work. And I've always, as a young person, I was always sporty, but I've never been a person that's thinking I'm going to the gym or I'm going for a run. That's not for me. When I found Shona, I was like, I can do squats whilst I'm waiting for the kettle to boil. I can just stand up and do 30 seconds of wall. I don't know what you call them when you do press ups against the wall. Are they wall proper? There you go. I can do that. So literally, I got hold of a pack of Shona's cards and have been using those ever since. Because not only do they help me physically, but what they actually do for me is they change my energy. Which means that if I've been sat at my desk, because I work from home, so, it's 10 steps from my kitchen to where I work, it's not miles, I can sit in my chair and my energy can get stuck. Mm-hmm. And just by getting up, going to put the kettle on, doing some squats, doing some wall push-ups, doing, just stepping side to side, I found that I can quite naturally do that. I think that's a leftover from having the kids on my hip, but, I'm naturally not even now thinking, okay, which one of these am I going to take? I'm actually now thinking to myself, what can I do whilst I'm standing here? Because I'm no good at just standing there waiting for the kettle to boil.
Yeah.
I'd be wiping down the sides, putting something away. But actually now I'm doing, a lot of the time it's squats, because I do like to do squats, because I'm always quite impressed that I can get down and get back up again. I know, thinking,
well done.
Go me, because there was a point, a couple of years ago where I wouldn't have been able to do that, and I can do it now. But this morning, I watched Shona's videos, and I always get on LinkedIn first thing in the morning, and I have a look around and see what's happening. And there is Shona telling me that just because you work from home doesn't mean to say you don't do a commute. And I was like, what? And there she is, just gone around the block on a commute to work and gone back into the house. And I thought, I'm up for that. I'm doing that. Got everything sorted, got my coat on, got the dog, and went for a walk. Just literally, I think it was something like 29 minutes in the end, which was quite long. Mm. I was expecting it only to be 15 minutes, and got back here ready to go, having done 3,000 odd steps and feeling a lot better about myself, sitting at my desk and feeling ready to go. I can feel that I'm much more upright.
Yeah.
And yet I've been looking at my diary and thinking, when can I add a walk in? When can I add a walk in? Oh God, I don't want to do. I haven't got enough time there. When can I add a walk in? When the days are longer, when we've got more light, I can add a walk in. And it just was that Shona, I honestly believe, I think your things come along for me at the moment where I'm going, you know, I need to have that little bit of a kick. Okay. And it's so simple. So simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you provide is just such a simple concept physically, but it also changes my energy mentally.
Yeah. Yeah. It does.
And
It does.
where
I mean, look, one
Thanks.
quote that I will often say, and it comes across as quite harsh, but it is true, because I was this person. But if you continue to say you don't have time for movement or exercise, I mean, exercise always makes you think like you have to go to a gym. But movement is the word I like. You know, sooner or later, you're going to have to make time for illness. And, you know, we're now 5 years on from the pandemic, or from the outbreak of the pandemic. And that just kind of then, you know, our homes became our gyms, our place of work, you know, and everything in between. And some people have stayed stuck there, you know, where, yes, okay, some people are moving back to, you know, into offices or a bit of hybrid stuff. But the amount of people that I speak to simply get up in the morning, they get up an hour later because they haven't got to go and travel, and then come straight to their desk. And then they're sat at their desk for, you know, maybe 8, 9 plus hours a day. And then what do? Well, you come out of the office or whatever you're working in, at home, to the living room where you go and sit down some more and watch TV. And then what do? Oh, you're going to go to bed. So you're not moving.
Very sedentary, isn't it?
Yeah. And you know, this sedentary, there's so much data on it now. I mean, you know, some people get offended by this, but they're saying being sedentary or sitting is the new smoking. So what I want to be able to show to people is that, you know what, it doesn't matter how busy you are, everyone. And I mean, you know, anybody listening to this now, I would say, stop what you're doing and notice the difference in energy this makes. Sit up tall and just take a deep breath in from your belly, and then just do a big stretch right into the ceiling.
I was going to say that. There is something that I'm always doing in between my sessions.
Yeah, just
to
a
change
big
my
stretch,
energy up.
just a shimmy out. You haven't even got to leave your chair. But even that, 20 seconds, it just what that does is, when you've got your arms above your head anyway, it increases blood flow. But that whole thing of a stretch anyway just stops you and makes you pause. And it will increase the blood flow to your brain, which helps things like focus, energy, mood. And over time, you do that a few times a day. Not only have you slowed down, it's going to speed you up as well. So, you know, that's kind of where I leave it there, really.
I now I put boundaries in place, and I have an hour's lunch break every single day. And in that time, I will do a couple of snacks, movement snacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that, and I am so much more productive in the afternoon than I ever was, because I give myself an hour every day. And I, you know, have something to eat, and I read a bit of a book that's got nothing to do with work. And I will go outside, and I'll take some deep breaths. So I'm getting outside air, and I'll do some movement snacks, you know, and it makes such a difference, doesn't it? Just actually giving yourself some time. You know, giving back to you, because you give out to an awful lot of people, makes the time for yourself, physically and mentally. And just the movement snacks have really, I mean, I ride my bike in my garage for 20 minutes every day. So I'm doing exercise as well. But the movement snacks change my energy. They change my energy, and I feel more productive when I come back. So it's really important for your mental health, just even to stand and move from one foot to another one. You know, it's movement, isn't it? And it's a big tool in my toolbox for supporting my own mindset now. Is, I'm feeling a bit groggy, I need to go and do some movement.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I'm seeing stuff all the time. You know, the chief medical officer will recommend 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise a week. And that basically means getting you to a point where you're at like a light jogging pace, so you can still breathe, yeah, but be a little bit breathy, but still be able to hold a conversation. That's what that kind of intensity means. But again, people say, well, 150 minutes, that's such a long time. Well, if you break it down, that's 30 minutes a day. You've already done that with your walk this morning, right? But some people will still go, I've just got so much to do today, I can't find 30 minutes. Break it down either then smaller ones, 3 10-minute chunks. And even that might seem like a lot on some days. This is where movement snacks came, the 10 3-minute ones instead. And, and again, you can even break it down even smaller and just go through the whole pack of movement snack cards if you want to, So there's always something we can do. And everything counts. People don't take into account things like, just doing normal household chores or, going up and down the stairs. If you need to go to the toilet, don't go to the one closest, use the stairs. And a simple little fact, climbing the stairs for 2 minutes a day is equivalent to jogging for 10 minutes a day. And I know what I'd rather do.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I went to the supermarket the other day and I actually thought, no, Shona would say, park at the end of the car park and walk down, which is exactly what I did because, okay. And I fast walked down.
Yeah. And you're less likely to get your calf knocks as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shona, it's been lovely to have a chat with you. And I'm hoping that we'll catch up again in a few months' time and take this a little bit further. So thank you ever so much for coming and joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Are you feeling stuck? Do you want to be able to create a better conversation with yourself, but just don't know where to start? I offer a free 20-minute session to see where you want to be and how to get you there. Just click on the link below. Remember, it's free. Book your space. It could change your life. Thanks for listening today. If you'd like to know more, you can find all the links down below. Oh, and don't forget to press subscribe so you can catch the next one. See you soon.